Welcome to Karen's HOA Nightmares. Get ready for the most outrageous, shocking, and downright hilarious tales from the world of homeowners associations. In today's story, Michael and Ruby Henry thought they'd found the perfect life in Willowbrook Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood. But when HOA President Angelina George and Officer Kendrick targeted them, seeking to steal Michael's prized $80,000 gun collection, Ruby's hidden past as a Marine military police officer came to light. With her tactical skills, Ruby uncovered Angelina's criminal operation, outsmarting the criminals who underestimated her. As the Henrys fought back, they exposed a widespread scheme targeting military families, ultimately bringing Angelina's operation to a halt. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest hot stories. A drill roars through the steel of my gun safe, and my heart races as I watch the scene unfold on the security monitor. Two individuals, disguised as HOA officers, have broken into our basement, attempting to cut through the safe that holds $80,000 worth of rare firearms. They believe we've fled. They're wrong. Ruby is still there, lurking in the shadows, observing them like she's studying a science experiment. My calm elementary school teacher wife now wears a look I've never seen before. Intense, strategic, and dangerous. In that moment, it dawns on me. I don't know this woman I married. Have you ever uncovered a hidden side of your spouse? Comment below. 6 months ago, Ruby and I moved to Willowbrook Estates in search of the suburban dream everyone talks about. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and neighbors who greet you with a wave. Ruby works as a third-grade teacher at the local school, and I run a home-based business. Life was predictable in the best possible way. We had our routines, weekend coffee dates, Netflix marathons, the perfect domestic life. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I wonder how I missed all the signs. Isn't it always like that? The most shocking things sneak up from places you least expect. My prized possession was my grandfather's collection of firearms. 5 rifles from the Korean War worth $80,000. These weren't just guns. They were pieces of history. They belonged in a museum, not in a safe in my basement. I kept them in a heavy Browning safe, bolted to the floor. The paperwork was extensive, but those rifles were a family legacy. Every time I looked at them, I felt connected to the men who had fought in wars before me. Ruby used to smile when I talked about them, calling it my man cave obsession. Little did I know, she was storing every detail away for later. Then Angelina George came into our lives. The HOA president, a successful businesswoman, and the kind of neighbor who shows up with homemade cookies on moving day. She owned 3 nail salons, drove a spotless white Mercedes, and had that practiced smile of someone who knew how to make others feel comfortable. "Oh, Michael," she said the first time she visited, her eyes lighting up when she spotted my gun cabinet. Antique firearms? My late husband collected pieces like these. They're so valuable. They require proper preservation. The way she asked about the guns, their value, and how I stored them, I thought it was just friendly curiosity. I was flattered that someone actually cared about my collection. Ruby, however, didn't seem as charmed. She watched Angelina with a level of attention I hadn't seen before, like she was waiting for something. When I asked her about it, Ruby casually mentioned, "She's asking a lot of very specific questions. More like an interview than casual chat." But I shrugged it off. Maybe Angelina just knew about guns, I thought. The weeks that followed were uneventful, but Angelina kept showing up for coffee, always finding reasons to hang out near the gun cabinet. She asked about our security system, our routines, and whether we traveled for work. It felt more like a surveillance operation than neighborly chit-chat. Ruby began becoming increasingly quiet during these visits, her teacher instincts kicking into high gear. "Something feels off about her," she said one morning, her voice guarded. A few weeks later, I witnessed something I should have reported to the police right away. It was late in the evening, around 10 when I noticed Angelina talking to a uniformed police officer outside our house. This wasn't a casual conversation. They were strategizing, gesturing toward our bedroom window, pointing at different angles of the house like they were doing an assessment. The officer took notes as Angelina explained something, and my stomach dropped. I stayed behind the curtains, telling myself it was just a routine check, but something about the way they looked at our house didn't sit right. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, phrases like valuable collection and security concerns. The officer's methodical note-taking felt too rehearsed. As I lay in bed, I heard strange noises outside, slow-moving diesel engines, and a black pickup truck creeping past our house. I saw 2 figures in the front seats, their phones glowing as they took pictures of our house. This was surveillance, not coincidence. But by the time I grabbed my phone to record, they had already disappeared. The next day, Ruby greeted me at the door, but her usual warm smile was replaced with something else. Controlled concern. "We have visitors," she said in a tone that made my spine tingle. It was Angelina, accompanied by Officer Kendrick, here to discuss community safety. The way they kept stressing community safety told me everything I needed to know. Something was off, and Ruby's teacher instincts were on point. Officer Kendrick looked like he had stepped out of a textbook on suburban law enforcement. Sharp uniform, confident demeanor, and that forced authority that made you comply without thinking. But as we talked, his questions went well beyond a typical safety check. He asked for specific details about my gun storage, security system, and our daily routines. When I raised an eyebrow, he casually explained that this was just a part of their enhanced safety assessments for collectors. Angelina nodded along, as if they'd rehearsed the whole conversation. When I asked for a badge number, Angelina cut in smoothly, explaining they were part of a specialized unit. Ruby wasn't fooled. After they left, she shared disturbing details. Angelina had mentioned several other families in the neighborhood with gun collections, all of whom had compliance issues. In the past 6 months, they had all moved out of the area. Suddenly, everything clicked. We were being targeted. The questions, the surveillance, the coordinated efforts. This wasn't a random series of events. We were being prepared for something much more dangerous than a mere HOA inspection. A few days later, Ruby received a threatening text message, along with pictures of our house taken from different angles. They had been watching us. Angelina and Kendrick had made a serious miscalculation. They thought they were dealing with a helpless suburban couple. They had no idea who they were really up against. When Angelina and Kendrick came back the following day, they were fully prepared for a confrontation. But this time I was ready. Every car that drove past might be reconnaissance, and every sound could be the beginning of their next move. Flight seemed like our only option against professional criminals who'd clearly done this before. Ruby stopped making coffee and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen in 3 years of marriage. Not fear, not concern, but something that looked almost like calculation. "No," she said simply, and the finality in that single word stopped my panic spiral dead. "We're not running, Michael. Sit down. There's something about me that you need to know." Her calm in the face of genuine danger was either admirable courage or terrifying naivety, and I couldn't figure out which scared me more. "What do you mean, no? They threatened us directly. These people have made 7 families disappear, and we're next on their list." But Ruby was already moving toward our bedroom with purposeful strides that suggested she had a plan I knew nothing about. She led me to the gun safe, inputting not the main combination I'd watched her use before, but a secondary code I didn't even know existed. Criminals might know about the primary lock system, but they had no idea Ruby had backup access to everything they were planning to steal. Inside the safe, next to my grandfather's carefully preserved rifles, was a security compartment I'd never noticed. Ruby withdrew a complete evidence package that made my world stop rotating on its axis. Photographs of her in military uniform, official discharge papers, and a thick folder of documents that looked like they belonged in a law enforcement investigation. The woman I'd married, the elementary school teacher who made cookies every Sunday, was holding proof of a life I'd never suspected existed. "What the hell is this?" I managed to whisper, staring at a photograph of Ruby in Marines dressed blues, looking younger, but wearing the same determined expression she had right now. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. My sweet, gentle wife, who helped 8-year-olds with reading problems, was apparently a trained military professional. Corporal Ruby Baker, military police, United States Marines, 6 years of active duty. She opened the folder to reveal something even more shocking. "And this is everything I've gathered about Angelina's criminal operation." The evidence was comprehensive and professionally organized. Surveillance photos of Kendrick watching our house. Audio recordings from a hidden voice app. I didn't know she owned copies of Angelina's salon client database with military families highlighted in yellow and financial records, tracking patterns of undervalued sales. Ruby hadn't been the innocent victim I'd assumed. She'd been conducting a counterintelligence operation that would have impressed federal investigators. My wife was apparently far more dangerous than the criminals targeting us. "Why didn't you ever tell me about your military background?" The question came out more hurt than angry, though I wasn't sure which emotion was more appropriate. Ruby sat down heavily, her hands steady, but her eyes vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. "He used to ask why I didn't keep any mementos from my service time. The truth is, I didn't want to remember. The last time I had to handle business, a family was being threatened by people like this. I thought I'd buried that version of myself permanently." Her vulnerability was genuine, but underneath it, I could see the tactical mindset reasserting itself. But now they're threatening our family, Michael. They're targeting people I care about. So, I've been building a case for weeks, documenting every interaction, every pattern, every piece of evidence that proves their criminal enterprise. The transformation was remarkable. The reluctant warrior awakening to protect what mattered most. She'd been letting me panic while she systematically dismantled our enemy's entire operation. Ruby, there are 3 experienced criminals with weapons and professional training. I was still thinking like a civilian, focused on the immediate physical threat rather than the strategic situation. But Ruby's assessment was coldly professional. Michael, there's one Marine who's been observing their operation since day 1. Kendrick is sloppy. Angelina is calculated but predictable. And Morrison is just amateur muscle with an intimidating appearance. They've made every mistake criminals make when they underestimate their targets. She showed me the full scope of her intelligence gathering. Detailed analysis of their operational patterns, legal research into similar cases, communication logs with local law enforcement, and strategic assessment of their vulnerabilities. I've documented everything, established contact with appropriate authorities, and prepared comprehensive counter-strategies. These people chose the wrong family to target, and they're about to learn that lesson the hard way. The elementary school teacher had vanished completely, replaced by someone with military precision and strategic thinking I'd never suspected existed. Looking through Ruby's evidence files felt like discovering my wife was actually a fictional character. Photos of Kendrick conducting surveillance, transcripts of conversations where Angelina discussed targeting strategies, financial records showing the systematic undervaluation of confiscated collections, and contact information for previous victims who'd been terrorized into compliance. She'd been conducting a professional investigation while I'd been worrying about immediate safety, gathering evidence that could destroy their entire criminal network. The most disturbing realization was how long Ruby had been operating in this mode without my knowledge. While I'd been playing the role of concerned neighbor, she'd been playing the long game of military intelligence. Every casual conversation with Angelina had been an opportunity to gather information. Every friendly interaction had been a chance to assess threats and identify weaknesses. My wife had been fighting a covert war while I'd been completely oblivious to the battlefield. How long have you known? I asked, though I suspected the answer would be humbling. Since the 2nd week we lived here, Ruby replied without hesitation. Angelina's questions were too specific, too professional, too focused on intelligence gathering to be casual neighborly interest. I recognized the pattern immediately from my military police training, so I started documenting everything and building a comprehensive case file. The scope of her preparation was both impressive and slightly terrifying. Ruby had anticipated this confrontation weeks before I'd even realized we were in danger. She'd prepared countermeasures, gathered evidence, established communications with law enforcement, and developed strategic options while maintaining perfect cover as an innocent elementary school teacher. The level of operational security required to keep me completely unaware of her activities suggested skills that went far beyond basic military training. But what struck me most was the reluctance I could see in her eyes. Even as she displayed professional competence that could have come from an action movie, this wasn't someone who enjoyed violence or conflict. This was someone who had hoped never to use these skills again. The personal cost of returning to her military mindset was written across her face, but her determination to protect her family overrode any personal reservations about becoming a warrior again. Ruby's phone buzzed with a security alert that made her face go pale as she read the message. Michael, they're outside right now. 3 vehicles, and they're not waiting until tonight anymore. She looked up from the screen with grim determination. They've decided to move fast before we can escape or call for help. But they have no idea that we're not the helpless suburban couple they think we are. Saturday morning, Ruby made a move that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about strategic thinking. She picked up her phone and called Angelina directly, her voice carrying the perfect blend of defeat and cooperation that I would have found convincing if I didn't know better. Angelina, Michael and I have discussed our situation extensively. We're ready to cooperate with your requirements. The performance was flawless, exactly the right amount of reluctant acceptance mixed with practical resignation that criminals expect from successful intimidation campaigns. Angelina's response carried unmistakable satisfaction and relief. Oh, Ruby, I'm so pleased to hear you've made the sensible choice. This really is the best outcome for everyone involved, and I knew you'd see reason once you understood the broader situation. The predatory pleasure in her voice was disgusting. But Ruby maintained perfect cover while signaling to me that the psychological manipulation phase of her operation was proceeding exactly as planned. We'll handle everything tonight, but Jeffrey wants assurance that all procedures will be conducted properly to avoid complications with insurance claims. After ending the call, I stared at my wife like she'd lost her mind. What are you doing? If we're going to fight back, why are we pretending to surrender? But Ruby's explanation revealed tactical thinking that was several moves ahead of my panicked civilian mindset. If we call the police now, they'll disappear before the authorities arrive. I want to catch the entire operation, not just prevent tonight's theft. We're going to document everything and destroy their business permanently. The strategic brilliance was terrifying in its implications. Ruby wasn't thinking about immediate safety. She was thinking about permanent resolution. These criminals have been terrorizing families for months, Michael. Tonight, we will finish their operation completely. But the personal risk she was accepting made my stomach twist with anxiety. Ruby, this is incredibly dangerous. You're not an active soldier anymore. What if your plan doesn't work perfectly? I remember my training and I have advantages they can't anticipate, she replied with confidence that was either inspiring or delusional. Besides, this time I know exactly when they're coming, how many they'll bring, and what their operational objectives are. Military precision meets suburban justice. Ruby began transforming our house with systematic efficiency that revealed professional training I'd never witnessed. She identified sight lines, established cover positions, and set up tactical advantages that had been invisible to my civilian eyes. Michael, I need your technical expertise for something crucial. Can our IT systems create false signals that make them think we're in different locations than we actually are? Her question revealed the scope of her tactical planning. She wasn't just preparing to defend our house. She was preparing to control every aspect of their criminal operation. My role wasn't to fight. It was to provide technical support that would give Ruby complete information superiority during the confrontation. I can route audio feeds, create video delays, redirect camera angles, and make them think we're anywhere except where we actually are, I confirmed, finally understanding how my civilian skills could contribute to military strategy. But are you absolutely certain this plan will work? Ruby's response carried professional confidence earned through experience. I was only beginning to understand. I've handled worse situations with less preparation and inferior intelligence. Tonight we control every variable. She showed me the complete intelligence package. She'd assembled surveillance photos of Kendrick conducting reconnaissance, copies of Angelina's client database with targeting information highlighted, audio recordings of planning conversations, and financial records proving systematic fraud. I've been building this case for weeks, Michael. Tonight, we execute the final phase and collect evidence that destroys their criminal network permanently. Ruby's preparation went beyond evidence gathering into operational planning that impressed and frightened me simultaneously. She'd mapped their likely approach routes, identified their probable tactical assumptions, and prepared countermeasures for every scenario she could anticipate. They expect frightened civilians who will comply under pressure. Instead, they're walking into a controlled environment where we dictate every aspect of their operation. They'll incriminate themselves completely before they realize what's happening. The psychological aspect of her strategy was particularly sophisticated. By agreeing to cooperate, she'd eliminated their expectation of resistance and made them overconfident about their operational security. They had arrived expecting easy victims and find themselves documented, recorded, and trapped by someone with professional training in exactly this type of situation. Criminal overconfidence is always their weakness, Michael. Tonight, they'll demonstrate their entire operation while thinking they're conducting routine business. But what struck me most was the personal cost this was requiring from Ruby. I could see the reluctance beneath her professional competence, the emotional price of returning to a mindset she'd hoped never to use again. This wasn't someone who enjoyed tactical operations. This was someone who had found peace in civilian life, being forced back into military mode by circumstances beyond her control. The sacrifice she was making to protect our family went far beyond physical risk into psychological territory that would leave permanent scars. Ruby's final briefing covered contingencies I'd never considered and backup plans that revealed thinking several steps ahead of anything our opponents might attempt. Remember, Michael, in conflict situations, the calmest person usually wins. I need you to trust me completely and execute your technical responsibilities without hesitation. Our success depends on perfect coordination between your civilian expertise and my military training. At 6:01 that evening, our doorbell rang with innocent chimes that made both of us freeze. Ruby checked the security monitor and her expression shifted into something I'd never seen before. Not fear, but a cold, professional assessment of an unexpected variable. Michael, this isn't Kendrick. This is someone completely different, wearing an FBI jacket. The implications hit us simultaneously. Either federal law enforcement had discovered our situation, or Angelina's criminal operation was far more sophisticated than we'd realized. Saturday night, 11:58 p.m. The motion sensors throughout our house triggered in sequence, creating an electronic symphony that announced the beginning of Ruby's carefully orchestrated operation. She had positioned herself with tactical precision, moving through our familiar rooms like they were a battlefield she'd studied for months. 6 individuals, coordinated entry, professional equipment, she reported through the earpiece I'd installed, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone completely in control of an apparently chaotic situation. Through our security camera system, I watched Kendrick directing his team with military precision that would have been impressive if it hadn't been used to rob us blind. They rolled in tool cases and sensors, the kind of kit built for quiet speed. These weren't desperate amateurs hoping to get lucky. This was a professional theft operation with equipment that cost more than most people's cars. The level of their preparation confirmed that our situation was far more serious than simple neighborhood crime. "Anna, they have seriously advanced gear," I whispered, watching the thermal overlay paint a bright square around the safe. Her reply was steady. "Let them work. We control sight, sound, and timing." She did not lecture. She moved. I fed decoy audio upstairs, while she slipped to the secondary access and brought our systems in line. I executed my part of the technical plan with precision that surprised me, routing false audio feeds to make them think we were hiding upstairs while Ruby actually controlled the basement, creating video delays that masked her movements and redirecting camera angles to give her complete information superiority. My civilian IT skills were providing military-grade tactical support, giving Ruby every advantage possible against opponents who thought they were facing helpless suburban victims. Kendrick's team reached the main safe and began their assault with industrial drilling equipment that screamed like mechanical banshees. The sound echoed through our house like a war zone, but they had no idea that Ruby possessed secondary access codes that rendered their expensive equipment completely unnecessary. While they focused on breaking through hardened steel, she was quietly accessing the safe through backup systems they didn't know existed, securing critical evidence while they incriminated themselves with every action. Thermal imaging confirms target location, breach in progress, maximum 10 minutes for complete extraction. Kendrick coordinated with professional efficiency that revealed extensive experience in similar operations. His team moved with practice coordination that suggested they'd done this many times before, which made Ruby's counter-operation even more impressive. She was dismantling professionals using their own competence against them. Ruby waited with predatory patience that reminded me she'd been trained for situations far more dangerous than suburban crime. Then, while they remained completely focused on drilling through our safe, she quietly accessed the evidence compartment through her backup entry system and retrieved the complete documentation of their criminal enterprise. They were providing perfect video evidence of their operation, while she collected proof of their broader criminal conspiracy. Suddenly, the drilling stopped with mechanical finality that meant they'd achieved their objective. They'd opened our safe and found my grandfather's antique rifle collection worth $80,000 of family history and heritage. That's when Ruby made her move, but not toward confrontation as I had expected. Instead, she activated the comprehensive evidence documentation system we'd prepared, turning their moment of criminal triumph into complete self-incrimination. The basement fell silent, except for the quiet sounds of professionals examining their stolen prize. Kendrick coordinated the systematic removal of each rifle, treating them like inventory rather than family heirlooms. Morrison documented each piece with photographs that would become evidence of their criminal enterprise. They worked with casual efficiency that revealed how many other families they'd robbed, how many other lives they'd destroyed through systematic intimidation and theft. Ruby emerged from the shadows, not to fight, but to deliver the psychological blow that would destroy their criminal confidence completely. "Congratulations, gentlemen. You've just become the stars of a comprehensive documentary." Her voice carried calm authority that froze them in place, rifles still in their hands, their faces perfectly visible, to multiple recording devices they'd never suspected existed. Kendrick spun toward her voice with trained reflexes, but stopped when he realized the scope of what Ruby had just revealed. Morrison's face went pale as he processed the implications of being recorded during the active commission of multiple felonies. The professional criminals, who'd thought they were conducting routine business, suddenly understood they'd walked into a trap that would destroy their entire operation. "Everything you've done tonight has been documented and transmitted to the appropriate authorities," Ruby continued with clinical precision. "Your systematic surveillance, your coordinated entry, your theft of items worth $80,000, and your possession of specialized equipment used in professional criminal enterprises. You're not stealing. You're performing for an audience that will ensure you never threaten another family." The transformation in the room was immediate and complete. Professional criminals who had entered with complete confidence found themselves trapped by someone who'd anticipated their every move and prepared countermeasures they'd never suspected possible. Ruby's tactical superiority was devastating precisely because they'd underestimated their target so completely. They'd expected frightened civilians and found a trained military professional who'd been several steps ahead throughout their entire operation. Kendrick realized first that their criminal enterprise had just been completely compromised by someone with skills they had never anticipated facing. Morrison stood frozen with stolen rifles in his hands, perfect evidence of their criminal intent. The other team members looked at each other with growing panic as they understood that everything they'd done had been recorded by someone who'd prepared for exactly this confrontation. But Ruby's revelation had layers they were still discovering. This wasn't just documentation of tonight's theft. This was exposure of their entire criminal network, their systematic targeting of military families, their coordinated intimidation campaigns, and their professional equipment that proved criminal conspiracy charges. One night's work had become the complete destruction of months of criminal operations. Ruby stepped fully into the basement room where armed criminals stood surrounded by evidence of their crime. But her presence commanded the situation completely. "You thought you were robbing helpless suburban victims," she said with calm authority that revealed military training they'd never suspected existed. "Instead, you've just provided complete documentation of your criminal enterprise to someone who spent years training to stop exactly this type of operation. Have you ever caught someone doing something wrong and managed to record video evidence? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to know how you handled having proof of someone's bad behavior." Kendrick spun with weapon drawn, but his practiced reflexes failed him when he saw Ruby's stance. Perfectly balanced, confidently positioned, and obviously trained for exactly this type of confrontation. His criminal experience had prepared him for panicked civilians, not military professionals who'd anticipated every aspect of his operation. "What the hell is happening here?" he demanded, but his voice carried uncertainty that hadn't been there during their confident entry just minutes earlier. "You made several critical tactical errors tonight," Ruby stated with clinical calm that demonstrated complete control of a situation that should have terrified any reasonable person. "First, you assumed suburban targets would be helpless victims who'd comply under pressure. Second, you failed to conduct proper reconnaissance on your targets' backgrounds and capabilities." She gestured toward multiple cameras that had been recording their entire operation with professional precision they'd never suspected existed. "How did you know we were coming?" Morrison asked with genuine confusion. That revealed how completely their criminal assumptions had been shattered. Ruby's response demonstrated strategic thinking that belonged in military command centers rather than suburban basement. "Third error. You targeted someone who spent years training to stop exactly this type of criminal operation. I didn't just know you were coming. I knew when you'd arrive, how many team members you'd bring, and exactly what equipment you'd use." Ruby produced the evidence folder from the safe. Comprehensive documentation that revealed the full scope of their criminal enterprise with devastating completeness. Surveillance photographs of Kendrick conducting reconnaissance on our house. Copies of Angelina's salon client database with military families highlighted for targeting. Financial records proving systematic undervaluation of stolen collections. And audio recordings of planning conversations that demonstrated criminal conspiracy. Her evidence gathering had been professional-grade intelligence work that would impress federal investigators. "Holy moly," Morrison whispered as he recognized the scope of Ruby's intelligence operation. The casual profanity revealed genuine shock at discovering their supposedly secret criminal enterprise had been completely compromised by someone they dismissed as an elementary school teacher. Ruby's documentation was comprehensive enough to destroy their entire network and send them to federal prison for decideds. Angelina's been using salon customer information to identify military collectors throughout the region. Ruby explained with matter-of-fact precision that made their criminal conspiracy sound like a business presentation. 7 families total, always following identical patterns. Fake authority pressure, manufactured legal complications, and coerced sales at fractions of actual value. You've been running systematic insurance fraud combined with theft by intimidation, targeting military families specifically because you assumed they'd be reluctant to involve authorities. The sound of multiple police vehicles surrounding our house provided perfect punctuation to Ruby's tactical superiority. Real sirens, genuine tactical response, and coordinated law enforcement arrival that had been timed with military precision. Ruby hadn't just documented their crimes, she had coordinated with legitimate authorities to ensure their complete capture and prosecution. "Fourth error," she continued calmly. "You assumed elementary school teachers can't be military tacticians." Detective Harrison toured with backup officers, their professional competence creating a stark contrast with the criminal amateurs who'd thought that they were sophisticated operators. Building secured, all exits covered, suspects in custody. He announced with efficiency that revealed Ruby's coordination with law enforcement had been comprehensive and professional. The criminals who had entered with complete confidence found themselves surrounded by real authority figures who had been prepared for exactly this confrontation. Kendrick realized with growing horror that they'd been completely outmaneuvered by someone whose capabilities they'd never suspected existed. "You set us up," he said, heat rising in his voice. "Anna did not bite. Chain of custody is intact. Your entry is on multiple independent feeds, and your equipment matches prior incidents. Detectives have the timeline, the targets, and the money trail." Detective Harris addressed Ruby with professional respect that recognized her contribution to what would become a significant criminal prosecution. "Outstanding work, ma'am. Your evidence package provides everything we need for federal charges against this entire network. The systematic targeting of military families, the coordinated intimidation campaigns, the specialized equipment for professional theft operations. You've handed us a complete criminal conspiracy on a silver platter." The validation from legitimate law enforcement confirmed that Ruby's tactical approach had not just been effective, but professionally exceptional. She'd conducted a counterintelligence operation that dismantled an established criminal network, using methods that would have impressed federal agencies. The elementary school teacher, who had hidden her military background, had revealed skills that belonged in law enforcement training manuals. But Detective Harris's expression suddenly darkened as he received an urgent radio communication that changed the entire situation. His professional composure cracked as he processed information that revealed complications none of us had anticipated. "Ma'am, we have a significant problem. Angelina George isn't at her salon as expected. She's missing. And according to dispatch, someone matching her description was spotted leaving town with what appeared to be a large amount of cash." The implications hit us with devastating clarity. While we'd been focused on capturing Kendrick and his team, Angelina had anticipated the possibility of operational failure and prepared contingency plans that included personal escape routes. The criminal mastermind who had orchestrated this entire operation had never intended to be present during the actual theft, protecting herself while her subordinates took all the risks and potential consequences. Ruby's tactical superiority had been comprehensive against the criminals we'd captured, but Angelina's strategic thinking had operated on a level that anticipated even military countermeasures. She'd used Kendrick's team as expendable assets while maintaining operational security that protected her personal freedom and financial interests. The perfect suburban criminal had revealed planning capabilities that went far beyond typical criminal thinking. "How much of a head start does she have?" Ruby asked with professional concern that recognized the implications of letting the operation's architect escape justice. Harris checked his communications again before delivering news that made our tactical victory feel hollow. "At least 6 hours, possibly more. She withdrew significant cash from multiple accounts yesterday, closed her business operations this morning, and her vehicle was last seen heading toward the interstate around noon." The criminal who had orchestrated months of systematic terror against military families had escaped while her subordinates provided a perfect distraction through their captured theft operation. Angelina's strategic thinking had anticipated the possibility of law enforcement intervention and prepared escape routes that demonstrated criminal sophistication we'd underestimated. She'd been several moves ahead, even when Ruby's military planning had seemed completely successful. Harris's radio crackled again with updates that painted an even more concerning picture. "We're tracking her vehicle, but she's had enough time to reach 3 different state borders. If she's been planning this escape route, she could be anywhere by now. And the professional criminals we'd captured were small-time operators compared to the criminal mastermind who'd used them as expendable pawns in a much larger strategic game." Ruby's expression revealed frustration that her perfect tactical operation had been undermined by strategic planning she hadn't anticipated. We'd won the battle decisively, capturing the criminals and protecting our family. But the war against Angelina's criminal enterprise remained unfinished. The suburban predator who terrorized our neighborhood had revealed escape planning that suggested experience with exactly this type of situation. But Harris's grimly determined expression suggested that law enforcement had resources for pursuing escaped criminals that went far beyond local jurisdiction. "Don't worry, ma'am. We have interstate cooperation agreements, federal involvement in financial crimes crossing state lines, and a comprehensive evidence package that will make Angelina George a priority target for capture. She may have escaped tonight, but she's just made herself a fugitive from federal justice." Sunday morning brought Angelina's final calculated gambit, executed from what she thought was a position of complete safety, hundreds of miles away from her collapsed criminal operation. She began her own video broadcast from her main salon, speaking with the perfect composure of someone who'd prepared for exactly this type of damage control scenario. This wasn't panic or desperation. This was professional manipulation designed to transform criminal exposure into victim sympathy through carefully crafted public relations. "Hello, everyone. Today, I need to share something critical about safety concerns in our community." She began with the practiced sincerity of someone who'd perfected the art of public deception. Angelina spoke directly to her audience with manufactured vulnerability, playing the role of a concerned community leader who had discovered dangerous neighbors threatening suburban safety. Her performance was flawless, exactly the right blend of civic responsibility and personal courage that would resonate with viewers who had no context for understanding her criminal background. She accused Ruby and me of being dangerous residents with illegal weapons, who attacked innocent community volunteers, trying to ensure neighborhood safety. The narrative transformation was masterful. Systematic criminal enterprise became community service, theft became safety inspection, and our resistance became violent extremism, threatening innocent citizens. Angelina's ability to reframe reality through strategic storytelling would have impressed professional propagandists. As your HOA president, I have our responsibility to protect everyone from these threats to community safety and family security. She continued with the moral authority of someone genuinely concerned about public welfare, rather than someone fleeing federal criminal charges. Thousands of viewers were watching, early comments supporting her position, buying completely into her carefully crafted victim narrative. She was spinning our story masterfully through professional-grade manipulation that could have fooled anyone without access to the complete context. But Ruby had anticipated even this contingency, preparing counter-strategies that demonstrated tactical thinking, several levels beyond anything our opponents had imagined possible. Using completely separate broadcasting systems, she began transmitting evidence footage parallel to Angelina's propaganda stream, creating competing narratives where truth could speak for itself, without editorial manipulation or strategic omission of critical facts. "What's happening to my viewer comments?" Angelina's confident performance faltered as she noticed her chat filling with evidence clips that contradicted everything she was claiming. Comments like, "Wait, that's actual break-in footage, and she's the criminal in this story," began, overwhelming her carefully managed narrative, as Ruby's evidence stream provided context that destroyed Angelina's victim performance completely. Ruby's counter-broadcast showed everything: comprehensive surveillance footage of the break-in operation, audio recordings of Angelina coordinating with Kendrick for systematic criminal enterprise, copies of client databases used for targeting military families, and financial records proving systematic fraud that had victimized multiple families throughout the region. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and completely devastating to Angelina's attempts at narrative control. The comment sections on both streams exploded with outraged viewers, who were witnessing real-time exposure of criminal conspiracy. "Angelina's been scamming military families. She's running organized crime from her nail salon. Someone call federal authorities immediately." The digital mob justice was swift, comprehensive, and absolutely merciless in its condemnation of someone who'd been caught red-handed in systematic criminal manipulation. For the first time since I'd known her, Angelina's calculated composure cracked under pressure she couldn't control or manipulate. Genuine panic replaced professional confidence as she realized her reputation, her business, and her freedom were being destroyed live in front of thousands of witnesses. "No, this isn't what happened. I can explain everything," she said. But her words carried desperate authenticity that contradicted months of careful lies and strategic manipulation. The transformation was remarkable. The confident criminal mastermind who terrorized families through psychological manipulation became a panicked fugitive whose crimes were being exposed to public judgment without possibility of spin control or damage management. Ruby's digital counter-strategy had stripped away every protective layer Angelina had constructed, leaving her vulnerable to the same kind of public humiliation she'd inflicted on her victims. Law enforcement arrived at Angelina's salon while both video streams continued broadcasting live, creating perfect documentation of her arrest that would be preserved forever in digital format. The image of her being handcuffed in front of thousands of viewers, her perfect suburban facade finally destroyed by her own criminal choices, went viral within minutes across multiple platforms that amplified her exposure exponentially. 3 months later, Ruby and I sat drinking coffee on our front porch, watching normal suburban life return to Willowbrook Estates, with appreciation for peace that only comes after surviving genuine danger. The criminal network that had terrorized our neighborhood was completely dismantled, its members serving federal sentences that reflected the serious nature of their organized crimes against military families throughout the region. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, who had been completely unaware of the criminal drama that had unfolded around her, stopped me with news that restored our faith in community justice. The new HOA board voted unanimously to honor both of you as community heroes who protected all of us from criminals we never suspected existed. Ruby smiled with genuine warmth that revealed how much she'd missed normal neighborhood interactions during her tactical operations. "We were just neighbors helping neighbors," Ruby replied with characteristic humility that downplayed her military expertise and strategic brilliance. But Mrs. Patterson's gratitude reflected broader community recognition that we'd done something genuinely heroic. Besides, some neighbors happen to have useful backgrounds that help everyone when criminals think they've found easy targets. The resolution felt satisfying in ways that went far beyond personal safety. Justice had been served not just through law enforcement, but through community recognition that distinguished between real threats and manufactured fears, between genuine authority and criminal manipulation, between vulnerable victims and capable protectors who chose peaceful lives, but maintained skills necessary for defending family and community when circumstances required action. Ruby kissed me with affection that carried relief, satisfaction, and renewed appreciation for the peaceful suburban life we'd chosen together. The most dangerous people often look completely harmless, she said with wisdom earned through experience most people never face. Angelina learned that lesson too late to save herself from the consequences of underestimating people she thought were easy. Victims. The best protection comes from people who choose peace but maintain skills necessary to defend their family when circumstances beyond their control require action. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in looking for fights, but in being prepared when fights come looking for you.